Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is nutrition, and we're going to discuss kind of a comparison of two calorie tracking methods. So the reason for this podcast is I've recently had people reach out who are listeners, and even some people who are following some programming of mine, and the discussion is it's based around, do I need to count my calories in order for me to be successful? So sometimes I'll have people use counting apps like, MyFitnessPal and whatnot, and things in which they can kind of like enter exactly what they eat per day. It counts the exact calories, and then I give them kind of rules and things that they should do with those calorie numbers. The other method is more of like a volume control, where I tell them about the right foods to eat, the portions they should be having, and then based on them being consistent with their food intake, we get a sense of control over calories. So the calories can absolutely swing a little bit day to day. Whether they have say a cup of white rice or a cup of potatoes, there's going to be a caloric difference in there. But if they eat the same amount every day and they're pretty consistent, it gets us a consistent level of caloric intake. So let's just say, for example, one person, if they're using the counting method, they know they can eat, say, 2,000 calories a day, and they'll be pretty spot on, plus or minus a little bit here or there. The other person who does volume control is we might have them eating, a certain list of foods, certain amounts of foods, like measurements and stuff, and it puts them generally between, say, 1,900 and 2,100. So it puts them around the same consistency every day. So they might have a little bit of a bigger window than somebody who specifically counts macros every day, counts calories. But by them being consistent and using volume control, they're still creating consistency. They're still creating a sense of tracking their calories. So what the real goal is for both of these, whether you count your calories with an app or know the exact number, or whether you do volume control, the whole point is we're consistent enough to see what happens to our body. And then if we want to do something different with the results of our body, we can then change whatever it is that we're doing. So either method, if I say want to lose weight, and I start either method and I have pretty good energy levels, but in the first 2 weeks I really only lost like a pound or two, then I know I need to bring down my food intake, whether that's through exact calorie counting or maybe we reduce their portion controls with volume control. So their portion amounts, but you would, based on the results, you then change what they're doing, like either strategy that you use. So whether you're using counting calories like apps or whether you're using volume control, both of them is just to create something that's consistent so you can see what response you get from the body and then be able to manipulate that over time. So we've talked before in diets and stuff like that, and this is for weight gain as much as weight loss, okay? Is that whatever you do today isn't going to continue to work forever. So if you say weigh 250 pounds and you lose weight down to 220 pounds, what got you to lose those 30 pounds won't get you to lose the next 30 pounds. Because you had a body of 250 pounds with a certain activity level in a certain condition. So your snapshot at 250, okay, who you are, what you did, blah, 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 is all different at 220. So therefore, your strategies or your techniques in order to make a change has to become different as well. So as your body changes, your strategies must change. That is absolutely 100% unavoidable. So you cannot put something into motion and then expect it to just be easy for the rest of your life and be the same. That causes people a lot of problems because they're lazy and they don't want to continue to try to work on this kind of stuff. Now, I'm sounding like kind of a jerk and people don't like being called lazy, but you can put whatever fancy word you want there. Is you want to lose weight, so you start a diet, you put in effort, you get some results, and then when you want more results, you don't feel like putting in more effort. It's like I said, call it whatever you want to call it. But that's typical. Everybody kind of does that. Myself would be included, except for this is my kind of passion. This is the stuff I love to do. So, for example, for me, is I don't, I always say this all the time, but I don't pay attention to my car much. So I actually did clean up my car recently. So that is a once a year occurrence. But I cleaned up my car, vacuumed it, took all the the mats out, washed them down, scrubbed them down, got them clean, got all the dirt and debris and junk out of the car, made it look really, really nice. Like wiped everything down with Armor All wipes and all that stuff. So everything looks super duper clean. But I don't really want to do that every week. I'll just probably do it the next time it kind of gets dirty. So I am lazy, okay? So I'm calling myself lazy. I am lazy when it comes to keeping my car clean. I will only clean it when I have to. So you might approach your nutrition the same way. You might only change it when you have to, okay? Now, I'm not going to judge you because I don't want you judging me on my car. So I'm not here to judge you. I'm just here to tell you what the truth is. So the truth is, if I want my car to stay clean, I have to continually, periodically put effort in to make it clean. If you want to continue to lose weight, you have to periodically continue to do on a regular basis, put effort in order to adjust your efforts in what you're doing in order to lose weight. Same thing with gaining size, okay? So if somebody's like say thinner or smaller and they want to get bigger, they have to eat more than they currently eat in order to gain some weight. Once they gain weight, they then have to eat even more. It's a never-ending cycle. So just like if I want my car to stay clean, I can't clean it once and then think it's going to be fine for the next 10 years. It won't be. Just like nutrition, you can't set a diet once into motion and then think it's going to stay the same. So I am lazy towards my car. You are lazy towards your diet. We're both lazy. So now I've offended myself as much as I've offended you. But that's the idea. Okay, so we've talked about that, how over time you have to continue to change your efforts. And that's why you need to track your calories, or you need to track your efforts of whatever you're doing, because whatever you do today will get you the results that you're going to see today in terms of this unit of time. Okay, so we might do something for say 6 weeks and we see what happens in 6 weeks. Well, if I then want to have a different result, so maybe I want to lose more weight, or I'm happy with the weight I lost and now I want to gain muscle. If I want a different result, I have to do a different type of effort. I can only know if I'm doing a different effort if I knew what the hell I was doing to get there. So if I have no clue how I lost 30 pounds, I won't know what to change in order to lose the next 30. Does that make sense? So when we say tracking calories, the reason why that's important is because you have to know what you've done now so you can then modify it and change it if you want to change the results that you're getting. So that's the whole point of us tracking calories, is we just have to have something consistent so that way when we want to make changes, we know what to change from. Now, as I've mentioned already, the two common ways that I'll have people use to track their calories is like actual counting and using apps and kind of plugging in data into like a computer program on your phone or on the computer or whatever. But there's something that you'll actually do that counts every single calorie you do all day. You enter in the foods, you enter in the amounts you ate, and it counts the numbers for you. The other way, like we said, is volume control. We eat from a good healthy list of foods. We know the serving sizes we're supposed to have, and then I just do that on a regular basis. If I know if I'm eating the right foods, and I know I'm eating within my same measurements, then I know I'm going to be consistent. Even if I don't know the actual number per day, I am still controlling it by eating the same foods from that same list and eating the same serving sizes from that list. Okay? Since I'm doing those two things consistently, my caloric intake will be consistent even if I don't know the exact number. Okay. Now, why do we have both ways? Because there's pros and cons of each way. So let's first look at counting. Okay, so if I'm going to count the exact number, the pro is you know the exact number. So for all my control freaks and type A personalities out there, you're going to freaking love that one because you're going to have a sense of being in control, even if you have no clue what the hell you're doing, which is probably a summary for your whole life. So I'm saying it in jest, but often people like having the sense of control, even if they have no clue what they're doing. They just have to have some sense of control in order to feel at peace and get rid of anxiety and fear and stuff. So sometimes there's really good reasons why people want to have control. So I'm being a little bit jokey, but I do understand it. So knowing the exact numbers for some people, they like that because there's what feels like certainty to it. So I know exactly where I'm at. I know exactly what I'm doing every day. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay. Now, that same thing is there with volume control because you're eating the same foods off the same list. You're eating the same service sizes off the recommended amounts. And if you're doing that every day, you're just as consistent as the people who count. But some people don't like not knowing the exact number. So even though they're eating the same foods at the same serving sizes, they still are fearful somehow that number is going to be different. So they don't like having that, without being able to physically see that number in front of their face every day. So they like this counting thing. So that is the pro, okay, of counting is you know exactly the number. Now the cons of counting, okay, is it only counts what you enter. So if you things we've run into in the past is sometimes people don't count cooking oils. So somebody might cook their meat in 3 to 4 tablespoons of olive oil or coconut oil or avocado oil. I actually prefer avocado oil myself. But anyhow, they'll cook it in oil and then they never kind of have any concern or any idea about that oil might actually soak into the meat. It might actually add calories. It does, by the way. So they don't have, if you don't enter the oil, it doesn't count those calories for you. So if you're eating meat, 3 or more meals per day, you might be getting more calories than you think you are because that oil is getting soaked into the meat every time you cook. So what ends up happening is if somebody never counts the oils, then they have the consistency of never counting the oils. So then when we want to change things in the future, we just make our changes and they'll continue to not count the oils anyhow, so that still is consistent. So just like with volume control, where you might not know the exact number and that freaks you out, often people who do counting don't actually know the real number. What the number they see is only the things they entered. So it doesn't they forget to enter in stuff like sauces or oils and things like that. So it's kind of funny in the sense that they think they have the exact number, but they sometimes don't. So it's a false sense of security. But the big key is whatever they did to get there in their diet. So if they've never been counting oils, as long as they continue to never count oils, that's going to be a consistent thing for them. That'll be fine. Okay. But that's a con in the sense that sometimes they'll be unaware of those added calories. So I've had people write me before and we'll kind of discuss and it takes usually and often quite a few conversations to break down these type of small details, but we'll find out that they might actually be having 300 more calories than they thought they were out of all these little side things that they're not adding throughout the day. So they might have been I'm only having 1,200 calories, but I can't lose weight, and everybody's been telling me 1,200 calories isn't enough, and when we figure it out, we break it down, we find out they're actually having between 1,500 and 1,600 calories, and they're like, oh. so that's something to consider is your apps and your counting function or feature only counts what you enter. If you're having things in your food that you're not entering, it's not counting it, okay? Then we have what about, snacks or a bite here or there? So people will, you'll still have to measure things out, by the way, to use a counting app. So you still have to know if you're having 4 ounces of meat versus 5 ounces of meat, or 200 grams of sweet potato versus 220 grams of sweet potato, whatever. But they'll kind of measure, one of my favorite things is when people measure nuts, like cashews, almonds, or whatever, and they'll measure out I had a half a cup of nuts. But on your half a cup of nuts, you can probably stack one more nut on top of that and it still kind of fits in a half cup. Well, maybe you can stack another nut on there. And then all of a sudden, they're having this mounded, huge mass of nuts that somehow still fits in this little half cup measurement. So it's kind of like a half cup of nuts with a quarter cup on top. But that's another thing that happens is people having little extras here or there that they sometimes don't add into their app. So we're all human beings. We all have the flaw of wanting perfection. So if we do this little thing and we're oh, well, that's going to mess up my perfection, I'm just going to tell myself it doesn't matter that much. I'm going to be oh, that doesn't matter. I don't have to enter that. So that way I can still see my perfect number at the end of the day. Well, you are lying to yourself. 100% you're a liar. Okay? Is anything you do that has calories has to count. Whether it's 2 calories, 100 calories, or 20 calories. If it has calories, it has to count. You can't just hide stuff and then please yourself thinking you're being perfect when you know you're flat out lying to yourself. We all do that, and we all have tendencies to do that in our life. So you have to really fight that natural urge to basically just make up bullshit. So if you're doing something, you have to count for it, okay? Or you'll pay for it later in the end. It's going to happen either way. So it's better to just be aware of it during the time rather than be quote-unquote surprised by the end whenever you knew you were doing it the whole damn time anyhow. The other issue we have is mismeasurements. So sometimes people just accidentally measure stuff wrong. So they're counting calories and they're adding in their details, but they're adding in the wrong details. Somehow they're messing something up, and that sometimes can be a problem. So I had an example one time where I had a person, I wanted them to get 40 grams of carbs from these foods. And I kind of listed the foods I wanted them to eat. Well, they read that as 40 grams of that food. So they were weighing out 40 grams of the food that they were eating. And they're like, man, this isn't a lot of food. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, you're getting 40 grams of carbs, like 3 to 4 to 5 meals a day. How is that not, that's a pretty decent amount of food. And we just kept talking and figuring it out. And I said, are you having 40 grams of carbs? And they said, yes, I'm having 40 grams of my carbs. And I said, of your carbs? And they said, yeah. And I said, no, I want 40 grams of carbs from your foods. And they go, oh. And it's like, okay, that was the problem. So sometimes that's what happens. You just get mismeasurements. So the other downside or the con of counting calories is it can feel overwhelming. So people just don't want to do it every day. So they get kind of lazy. They don't do it for a day or two. Then it feels like it's too enormous to get back on track. So they just kind of get shut down by having to have that burden on them every day of adding their details. Now, it doesn't take much, but all of us tend to live on the very edge of what we can handle. So if one or two little things get thrown into our life, all of a sudden, counting calories seems to go out the window because it doesn't seem as important, and then it's hard for them to get back on track. So that's something you have, is it's a turn off, turn on type thing. So if you're not tracking your calories, they don't know what they're doing. There's no middle ground. So they're either on or off, black or white, okay? And then the other thing is when they're off, since they don't have a way of really measuring it, they just lose their shit and eat everything under the sun and say, well, it was a bad day anyhow. And I'm like, well, it would have been a lot better of a day if you wouldn't have had a whole bag of Oreos. You didn't need to count your calories to know that a bag of Oreos was probably a bit too much. So that's something that happens often too, is when they get off track, they tend to really go off track. Okay, they use it as an excuse to get lazy. So now, volume control. It is not a savior. It doesn't have it has its own cons as well. So, but one of the things, the pros of volume control, which is where you have a list of foods you know are healthy. Then you have a serving size that you should have of these various foods. So if you're going to have a meat, you're going to have 4 to 6 ounces of meat, say something like that. If you're going to have a carb, you're going to have roughly about a cup's worth of carb. So if you get some mashed sweet potatoes or white potatoes or pasta or rice, you're going to have a cup. So you just kind of have this consistency of good foods. You have this consistency of measurement. So that is volume control. So you might not know the exact calories, but you know the exact foods you're having the exact same amounts all the time. So that's how you form your consistency that we can then eventually change if we want to change our results. So this is more lifelong manageable. You can do this more throughout your entire life rather than having to add stuff into an app all the time. Okay, so that's one of the benefits of it. Plus, it tends to flow with life easier. So when you do have those stressed moments, you're still just eating the right foods and you're still just measuring them. You don't have to do anything extra. Okay, you just do what you already been doing. So if you're doing special events or you're on vacation for a week, things that would normally throw you off from your macro counting, like using an app, it doesn't tend to throw you off as much if you do volume control. Okay, it's just kind of an easier, life-sustainable way of doing it. Now, the cons are, again, you have to measure everything. So if I don't measure something, I'm not going to be accurate with how much of it I'm eating. Okay, so one of the things you have to realize is your eyes lie. Your eyeballs will lie to you. Okay, your eyeballs and your stomach have a conversation, and the stomach says, I want more food. I need you to see things as smaller. And the eyeballs go, yeah, sure, whatever. And then all of a sudden you're eating things that you're like, this is probably only 4 ounces. And then you weigh it and it's 8 ounces. And you're like, ah, shit. So you still have to measure everything, okay? Now, you have to have consistency in your efforts. So sometimes what people need to do in order to be successful with volume control is they have to have some method of tracking their adherence. So when you do counting, you know your adherence because you see that number every day. Okay? Whereas if somebody's doing volume control and they don't have any tracking of adherence, they'll just go, oh yeah, I had a good day. And then you talk to them and be like, well, actually, you missed your afternoon meal. Oh yeah, I did. And it's like, well, that's a thing. That's a significant thing. You missed calories there. So that's going to give us inconsistency if you then have that meal the next day, but you didn't have it today. So we'll still have adherence tracking, where if they have a good meal, they'll put a check mark. If they have a bad meal, they put an X. If they miss a meal, they leave it blank. So that is quicker and easier to do than to add numbers into a counting app. So you still have to have some form of accountability for anything to be successful. Okay, and this is outside of even diets. But for any diet to be successful, you have to have some accountability. So you still have to kind of track your efforts and see how well you're doing. But it's easier throughout the day to put a check or an X or a blank than it is to add in all the food and count up all the macros and calories and stuff. Okay, so the other thing is like we said, for our control freaks out there, they don't like this method because they feel like they don't have control over it, which is just absolutely fake and false. So it's a lie you're telling to yourself. Is they want to know the exact number. Well, if you eat the right foods and you measure out the right amounts, you're going to be within the right window. Okay, you're going to be where you need to be. But they want to have the control of seeing the exact number. Now, if somebody has that behavior, I tend to like to try to break that as fast as I can. Because if you have a black and white mentality, like where it's either right or it's wrong, or I need to know this because that's the way it is, blah, 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 blah. Well, the second life gets in your way, because life is not black and white. Life is full of grays out the wazoo, okay? Life doesn't fit right, wrong. Life is messy. Life has moments where you have to choose between two bad things sometimes, and that's just the way it is. You don't even have a good choice. You just have two shit choices, and you're hoping you pick the least of the shitty ones. That's life, okay? So when somebody has this black and white mentality, they're going to be often very hot or cold on diets. So they're the type of person where 1 month they're like, I'm doing such and such diet. I'm doing a keto diet. I'm perfect. I'm great. Look at me. I lost 20 pounds in the first, month. Everything's great. Then the next month, ketogenic diets are the worst things in the world. I have no energy. Like, it was stupid. Da 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 da. So they're always like hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. So we want to avoid that and just learn how to live life. Like, live within the messiness of life. Don't try to make things perfect because they can't stay perfect. Okay? Life is not perfect. So one of my favorite books is How to Be an Imperfectionist. I forgot the author name, but you can look up the title. How to Be an Imperfectionist. So I am imperfectionist. But it's just that lesson that, like, life is not perfect. You're going to have kind of middle ground sometimes, and that's the best you can do. So volume control, form of counting calories or tracking calories. Okay, so volume control as your form of tracking calories. It understands that life is variable, and it's a little more variable with life than the counting calories style of tracking calories. Okay, so those are the two main methods that I tend to use. They're the ones that fit most people's lifestyles, needs, da 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 da. So now if I have somebody like, so which one's best? That would be like, well, which one should I do? And it's a very good answer. Very good question. So the answer is whichever one you can be more consistent with. And since volume control involves a range of calories, if you are doing something that requires a very specific, very controlled number, such as like a bikini competition, bodybuilding competition, an aesthetic-based competition, or if you're doing a weight cut for a competition, okay? If you have a very specific result that you need, then your calories have to be tracked specifically. So that's where counting calories is absolutely necessary. So if you get ready for a competition, I have done prepping people for competitions with volume control, but I did a shitload of work that they never saw. And I did it on purpose, and they didn't need it. They already had a ton of stress. But if you're ever doing this on your own, tracking calories, like actually counting them, is going to be a better way for you to do it on your own. If you have a nutritionist, they'll, like me, sometimes I'll give them volume control just to make life easy for them, and then I'll be behind the scenes working all the details. So, but if you have very specific goals, you have to track your calories specifically. So that makes sense, okay? If you have a general goal of be less fat, then volume control is totally fine. Okay? You can go from fat to less fat with volume control. You can even go from decent to like a good beach body with volume control. But if you wanted to get, like, say, sub 10% body fat, you're probably going to want to get down to actually counting calories. Okay? So, it's kind of whichever one fits your personality, whichever one feels like it's something that you can sustain for a longer time or lifelong. I like for people to know how to do both, because there are times in your life that you're going to want very specific goals. So say all of a sudden you sign up for a beach cruise or something, like boat cruise or whatever, and you're like, man, in 12 weeks I want to look like banging. So you're going to try to save like the last 12 years of being lazy in 12 weeks, ain't going to happen. But if you count calories and you do very specific tracking, you can make the most out of those 12 weeks. But then when you go on the boat cruise or after vacation, you don't want to do all that work. So you go back to volume control. So volume control is the more like sustainable, kind of enjoying life kind of way of doing things. So it's good to have both ways of doing it. Okay? So hopefully this gave people like who are looking for which one they should do. It gives you this idea of this podcast was to give you why I would use one versus the other. Okay? And the pros and cons of one versus the other. And then also to point out that they both do the same damn thing. They both just create consistency in your behaviors. And then when you want to change your result, you can now have something that's consistent that you can change from. Okay? So they both work great. It's just whichever one that you're going to be able to sustain for a longer period of time. Cool? Okay. So hopefully this helped. Hopefully it gave them some insights on the questions they've been asking. If you have any more specific questions, shoot us an email at brutalironGym@gmail.com. It actually is really, really fun to get emails from everybody. I am falling about like a week behind, so it usually takes me about a week to get back to everybody. But I really appreciate people emailing. It's fun to know somebody's listening. So thank you for those who send emails. Cool. Okay. If you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. Also, if you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. Please, please, please. Okay. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. So please share it if you can. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. Like I said, it's very motivational. It's very exciting, very enjoyable to know somebody's actually listening and that people are finding benefit from this, okay? So if you do want to let us know what you would like to learn about, you can tell us at our email, brutalironGym@gmail.com. Okay? As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.